You still drive that rust bucket? Pathetic, Dad. The words hit me like a fist in the chest, sharp and bitter. I looked up at my son, Alex, standing in my garage with his designer jacket and freshly polished sneakers, smirking as if he owned the world. I had spent decades in this small town of Elkhart, Indiana, working the mechanic's shop my father left me. Every bolt I tightened, every engine I rebuilt, was a testament to hard work and honesty. And now, my own son was mocking it, laughing at the life I had built for us. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. I remember the early mornings, Alex and I walking down to the shop while the sun painted the sky orange and pink. I taught him how to turn wrenches, read engines, and respect tools, the way my father taught me. But somewhere along the way, he traded grease-stained hands for office suits, ambition for flash, and gratitude for scorn. I had given him everything I could: a college education, a startup fund for his first business, a car for his high school graduation. And yet, here he was, looking down at me as if I were obsolete, a relic of a forgotten era. I sank into the workbench stool, the smell of motor oil and gasoline filling my senses. Every tool in this garage had a story. Every dent in the trucks I fixed had a lesson in patience and care. And now, Alex was trying to dismiss it all with a single cruel remark. Alex crossed his arms, still smirking. You know, Dad, most people in this town moved on from these junkers years ago. Maybe it's time you did too. I laughed softly, shaking my head. These junkers? Alex, these trucks are the backbone of this town. The people who rely on them, the jobs they create, they're more real than your shiny office and your high-rise meetings. He rolled his eyes. Please, Dad. You think patching up a few old trucks makes you successful? Look around. You're stuck in the past while the rest of us move forward. The words cut deeper than he knew. Not because they were true, far from it, but because they came from my own blood. My son, whom I had raised, was dismissing the sweat and decades I had poured into my work, as if my sacrifices meant nothing. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the old Ford F-150 I had spent weeks restoring. The engine purred like a satisfied cat. It wasn't just a truck. It was a symbol of perseverance, of dedication, of a lifetime of honest labor. And Alex thought it was a joke. I thought about all the times I had gone without, so he could have more. Skipping meals, working nights in the shop, repairing trucks for less just to help neighbors stretch their budgets. Every late night I spent bent over a carburetor, every weekend spent under a hood. It had been for this family. And now, he had the nerve to mock it, to undermine everything I had built. And then I realized something crucial. The same town that laughed at my obsolete trucks, the same people Alex looked down on, they were also reliant on the very skills I honed every day. Diesel engines, classic cars, farm vehicles, all depended on my hands, my mind, my commitment. Alex had underestimated me, underestimated what I could do with knowledge, patience, and a little bit of leverage. I could see it already. He had built a life of comfort and arrogance, and it was all fragile, all dependent on systems he didn't understand. And I could expose it. The question wasn't whether I could teach him a lesson. The question was how carefully, how thoroughly I could do it. Because sometimes the people who mock you the most are the ones who need to learn the hardest lessons. And Alex? He had just signed up for the education of a lifetime. The following week, Alex's arrogance only deepened. He strutted into the shop wearing a new suit, practically yelling over the clatter of tools. Dad, I've been talking to some investors, he announced, leaning against the counter. I think it's time to scale up. You're living in the past with these trucks, but I've got the future mapped out. Maybe you should just step aside and let me handle the business side. I wiped my hands on a rag, watching him carefully. Handle the business? Alex, you've never fixed a single engine here in your life. You don't know what keeps these trucks running. And you certainly don't understand what keeps this town moving. He laughed, a sound sharp and dismissive. Please. People want innovation, not rusted engines and old-school grease monkeys. That's you, Dad. I'm talking real growth, real money. I shook my head, keeping my voice calm. And what happens when that growth depends on things you don't understand? The trucks, the deliveries, the clients. Everything runs on my knowledge, not your spreadsheets. Without it, all your innovation collapses, he smirked. You're overthinking, Dad. Let me handle it. Over the next few days, I began to observe quietly, tracking every project Alex had started with the investors he had wooed. At first glance, everything looked sleek. Apps, new delivery routes, promises of expansion. But underneath, there were cracks. Weak supply chains, untested trucks, overextended leases. All the things he thought were invisible to anyone but me. I started planting seeds, subtle adjustments that Alex would never notice immediately. Misfiled paperwork, delayed orders, accidental miscommunications with suppliers. Every move seemed small, harmless even, but it was carefully calibrated to create a chain reaction. Meanwhile, the town noticed. A few of my longtime clients began calling me privately, nervous. Robert, have you noticed Alex's new routes? Asked Frank, who ran the local feed store. Some deliveries are late. Trucks breaking down. People are complaining, I smiled politely. I've seen a few things. You know, sometimes young people don't understand how much experience matters. Frank nodded, already sensing where the wisdom lay. Then came the first confrontation in public. Alex had arranged a meeting with investors at a local diner in downtown Elkhart, trying to impress them with his future plans. I happened to be there, picking up parts for a customer's truck. As he presented charts and slides, the investors frowned. Trucks scheduled for deliveries weren't arriving. Routes were overlapping. Equipment listed as new and ready hadn't been serviced. Each misstep compounded the impression that Alex's operation was fragile and poorly managed. One investor leaned over, whispering, "Are these numbers accurate? These trucks aren't showing up where they're supposed to. The system seems unstable." I watched silently from a booth, sipping my coffee. He had no idea I had quietly orchestrated minor misalignments in scheduling, making his operation wobble without touching a dime of my money. Just knowledge. Just experience. Alex finally noticed me at the diner. His face turned red. "Dad, what are you doing here? This is important." I waved casually. "Just grabbing some lunch, son. Thought I'd see the future in action." The tension was palpable. He tried to recover, but the investors exchanged doubtful glances. Every slip, every error, magnified under their scrutiny. That night, back at the shop, Alex was furious. "This is ridiculous." Everything was perfect. How did they doubt me? I leaned against the counter, voice calm. Because perfection isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's knowing the people, the trucks, the roads, the clients. It's understanding the little details that keep everything moving. You've ignored those details, and now you're seeing what happens. He slammed his fists on the workbench. "I'm not going to fail. I can fix this." "Maybe," I said slowly, "but only if you learn to respect the foundation. Right now, you're trying to run before you can walk." And that's when I realized the lesson had begun. Alex's arrogance, his overconfidence, his blind reliance on privilege. Everything could be dismantled subtly, efficiently, and publicly. He had mocked my life, my skills, and my sacrifices. Now it was time for him to feel the weight of that disrespect, piece by piece. The stage was set for the next move, and I would make sure the impact was unforgettable. I spent the weekend planning quietly, going over every detail of Alex's operation, every delivery schedule, every client order, every truck maintenance record. Nothing was beyond my reach. I didn't need to sabotage recklessly. I only needed to reveal the cracks he had already ignored. I began by contacting a few longtime suppliers who had worked with me for decades. I didn't reveal my intentions, just mentioned, casually, that they should double-check invoices and delivery schedules. They were surprised, but trusted me. They had known my integrity for years. I didn't need to manipulate them. I only needed them to notice what Alex had overlooked. Monday morning, I walked into the shop before sunrise, the air cold and damp in the early Indiana mist. I pulled out my old leather notebook, filled with maintenance logs, client contacts, and schedules. It wasn't fancy, but it had kept this business running for decades. I called a few clients who had already experienced minor disruptions under Alex's watch. "Hey, Mr. Whitaker," said Mr. Daniels, the owner of a local hardware store. "We had a problem with deliveries last week. Some trucks didn't show, and the items arrived late." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I understand. Can you tell me exactly which trucks and routes were involved?" As he described the issues, I smiled faintly. Everything was lining up perfectly. Alex's mistakes, magnified by my subtle guidance, were becoming undeniable. By midweek, word had begun to spread. Alex tried desperately to reassure his investors, sending updated spreadsheets and claiming everything was under control. But I had anticipated every move. Every reassignment he made was countered by minor scheduling errors that seemed coincidental, but weren't. The town, the clients, the suppliers, they all began to see the truth. Alex had overestimated his knowledge, underestimated experience, and overlooked the human element that kept the system alive. Then came the first mini-reveal in a public setting. I attended the monthly Elkhart Chamber of Commerce meeting, where Alex had planned to announce his expansion plans. As he spoke about growth, technology, and efficiency, I listened quietly, letting the room fill with anticipation. A local farmer raised a hand. "Alex, we've noticed trucks aren't arriving on schedule. Some of the deliveries last week were incomplete. Can you explain why?" Alex fumbled. There were some logistical issues. We're correcting them." I stood, voice calm, but loud enough to reach the room. "Alex, perhaps I can clarify. These trucks and schedules run on systems he's inherited but never learned to manage. Without proper oversight, even the simplest operations fail." Gasps echoed through the room. Alex's face turned red, his voice shaky. "Dad, that's not—" I raised a hand. "Please, let the facts speak for themselves. The delays, missed orders, and mismanaged routes weren't accidents. They were the result of overlooking experience, dismissing the foundation, and thinking flashy spreadsheets replace hard work." Whispers spread across the audience. Investors exchanged uneasy glances. The foundation Alex had built on arrogance and disregard for experience was crumbling under public scrutiny. That evening, I returned to my garage, the familiar scent of oil and metal comforting me. I had started this carefully, methodically, with no need for confrontation. The mistakes were his own, the arrogance his own, and the consequences were finally visible to the world. I looked at my old Ford F-150, polished and humming with precision. That truck had seen decades of use, repairs, and patience. And tonight, it symbolized something more than just a vehicle. It represented resilience, knowledge, and the quiet power of truth. Alex had mocked it, mocked me. But soon, everyone would see that the real strength wasn't in his suit, his spreadsheets, or his investor pitches. It was in experience, in wisdom, in the hands that built a life from the ground up. The next step would be public, undeniable, and irreversible. Alex wouldn't have a chance to hide behind excuses or charm. The day of reckoning arrived on a bright Thursday morning. Alex had scheduled a major presentation for his investors at the Elkhart Civic Center, boasting about his revolutionary delivery system and the bright future he was building. He didn't know I would be there, not just as a spectator, but as the catalyst for everything that would follow. I arrived early, dressed in my usual work clothes, smelling faintly of motor oil and gasoline. The investors didn't recognize me at first, but the murmurs started as soon as I took a seat near the front. Whispers of, "That's Robert Whitaker, the mechanic, and is he Alex's father?" rippled through the room. Alex began confidently, projecting slides and charts, extolling efficiency, profit projections, and expansion. But the second slide popped up, showing delivery schedules, truck logs, and client reports, carefully documented mistakes that had accumulated over the past month. Every missed delivery, every faulty maintenance record, every uncoordinated route I had subtly engineered appeared in crisp detail. The investors' expressions shifted instantly, from curiosity to concern to outright disbelief. "What's this?" one asked. "These delays, these errors. How did they happen?" Alex's confident smile faltered. There were some minor scheduling issues, nothing major." I stood calmly, projecting my voice across the room. "Nothing major? Let me clarify. These are the results of mismanagement, of ignoring the systems that actually keep these trucks running, and of overlooking experience in favor of arrogance. The foundation Alex is presenting as innovation is built entirely on my work, my knowledge, and my oversight, and he has failed spectacularly to respect it." The room fell silent. Investors glanced at each other, whispering and flipping through the printed materials I had prepared for them. The evidence was undeniable. Alex's face turned red, then pale, then red again. "Dad, this isn't fair. These are mistakes I'm correcting." "Correcting?" I said softly, each word deliberate. "You've had weeks to understand what I've built, yet you still fail to grasp the basics. You think a PowerPoint presentation makes up for decades of hands-on experience?" An investor cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitaker, are you saying these errors are consistent? That the system is unreliable?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "And it's not just the system. It's the lack of respect for those who maintain it. These delays, missed deliveries, and operational failures are not accidents. They are the result of neglect and arrogance." Alex's knees shook. He tried to speak, but his voice broke mid-sentence. The investors weren't buying his excuses. One of them, a longtime supplier, spoke up. "I've known Robert Whitaker for decades. If he says this system is fragile under Alex, then it's true. We've already had complaints from our clients about missed orders. This isn't theoretical. It's real." Alex looked around the room, desperation creeping into his eyes. Lauren, seated quietly beside him, whispered, Maybe we should have listened." I let the silence stretch. The public humiliation was deliberate, measured, and precise. Every investor, every supplier, every member of the audience now saw the truth. Alex's empire of confidence, his future plans, depended entirely on me, and he had no idea how fragile it really was. By the end of the meeting, the investors had withdrawn funding, citing lack of operational control and unreliability. Suppliers paused pending verification, clients canceled contracts, and the local press began covering the story, highlighting Alex's reliance on the mechanic who had built this town's delivery backbone. Alex slumped in his chair, defeated. Lauren didn't even speak. I left the Civic Center quietly, the smells of oil and pavement still clinging to me. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, the sky a brilliant orange. I felt a rare lightness, a calm, knowing satisfaction. Justice had been served, not with rage, but with truth and precision. That evening, Alex tried to call. His voice cracked. "Dad, I don't know what to say." "Everything's falling apart," I replied simply, my voice steady. "You ignored what mattered most. Now you face the consequences. Respect isn't given, it's earned. I've earned it. And now you know the price of arrogance." He didn't argue. He had nothing left to argue with. The town would talk for months. Investors would remember, Alex would never forget. And I returned to my garage, the smell of oil, metal, and hard work comforting me more than any applause could. My trucks ran perfectly. My clients trusted me, and my legacy remained untouchable. The lesson had been learned. Respect the foundation, honor experience, and never underestimate the quiet power of someone who has built their life with integrity. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. Alex and Lauren withdrew from the town's social circles. Their office lease was terminated, and suppliers refused to work with them after verifying the repeated mishaps. The local press ran stories highlighting the collapse of their overconfident venture. They had been humbled, and in a very public way. I returned to my shop in Elkhart, walking among the trucks that had carried me through decades of work and life. Each dent, each scratch, each repaired engine carried memories of late nights, cold mornings, and sweat-soaked weekends. These were not just machines, they were my legacy, and now the respect I had fought to maintain was restored. One crisp morning, Mr. Daniels, owner of the hardware store, stopped by the shop. "Robert, I just want to say, the town talks, but people like you don't need to prove anything. You showed what real experience looks like." I nodded, the corners of my mouth lifting in a quiet smile. "Thanks, Frank. It's been a long road. But the important thing is that things are back where they should be, Emily." My niece had returned to help me with the shop. Her youthful energy, a welcome change from the tension of the past months. She reminded me that while Alex had chosen arrogance, there were still younger generations who respected knowledge and hard work. Then came the inevitable call from Alex. His voice was thin, almost pleading. "Dad, I know I messed up. I didn't respect your work, your sacrifices. I see that now." I listened quietly, letting the silence stretch. Then I spoke calmly. "Alex, respect isn't something I can give you. It's something you earn, and right now, you have to learn to stand on your own. You have lost the foundation beneath you because you ignored it. Let this be the lesson you never forget." He didn't argue. There was only the sound of a man finally facing the consequences of his own hubris. Autumn arrived, painting the streets of Elkhart in warm golds and reds. I walked through my backyard, the smell of damp earth and fallen leaves filling the air. The trucks gleamed in the sunlight, engines humming, a testament to resilience and care. I breathed deeply, feeling the peace that comes from knowing justice had been served, not through rage, but through truth. I thought of my late wife, Sarah, and whispered, "We did it right. We built something real. We preserved what mattered." The town may have witnessed Alex and Lauren's downfall, but the satisfaction was personal. I hadn't sought to humiliate, only to reclaim respect, to restore the dignity that had been dismissed by arrogance. The final poetic justice came quietly. Alex and Lauren were left with their pride, but without fortune, without status, without the respect they had once taken for granted. Their arrogance, their scorn, their failure to understand what truly sustains life, skills, experience, and integrity, had undone them completely. And I returned to my garage, the familiar scent of oil and metal comforting me. My trucks ran flawlessly. My clients trusted me. And the legacy I had built with sweat and perseverance remained untouchable. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar. Sometimes, it hums quietly, like the engine of a well-tuned truck. And in that hum, I found closure. I had been mocked, dismissed, and disrespected. But in the end, I had not only survived, I had restored dignity, ensured accountability, and preserved my life's work. The world was quiet, the trucks ran smoothly, and I could finally breathe freely. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.